Hi, thank you for joining me. My name is Mindy Mandell, and I've been doing this series of videos on the Republic. Today we're going to go on with that. So in these last few videos, I've been looking at the different constitutions, and today we're on the last one, tyranny. So just to briefly run through this, there's been a downward shift that we have seen going throughout this. So from the healthiest state of mind that he calls aristocracy, to timocracy, which was the love of honor. And for those of you, by the way, who are new to my videos, if you haven't been watching the previous ones, then you haven't heard me explain that these are not actually looks at government constitutions. This is an analogy of the city-state to the soul. And so what Socrates is focusing on here are natures within the soul or constitutions within the soul. And aristocracy represents the healthiest state of mind or the healthiest state of soul. Timocracy then was that first shift downward. And it was marked by a slip in wisdom. What we saw there was that the person still values wisdom, but they're starting to slip. They haven't quite preserved the wisdom that they've gained. They may have been in the aristocratic state, but they've slipped because they haven't preserved their wisdom. And what Socrates has stressed throughout this dialogue and what I've stressed throughout these videos is that this is done with what he calls music and gymnastics. And in this dialogue, music refers to the study of states of mind, that we have to keep watching our state of mind. Wisdom is not something you just gain and then you're done and you always have it. You have to hold on to it, which means you have to keep watching to see that a false belief hasn't worked its way in, or maybe a false belief from childhood may come to the surface and be affecting you in a negative way. And so you need to keep watch. And also this idea of gymnastics, again, was the idea of keeping your energy strong. We saw in the allegory of the cave that knowledge functions at a higher power than does opinion. And so we have to keep our energy strong, our spiritual energy strong, in order to be able to function in that upper world. And I know I talked about that at great length in past videos, so I won't say any more about it here. We'll go on to the slip from timocracy to oligarchy. And this we saw was marked by a loss of justice because the desires were awakened by the love of money. And then we saw that those desires were challenging the reason-loving part of the soul for who's going to rule the soul. And that was, remember, described as that person who has the sort of battle going on between their social image of being proper and then their desires that are battling with them. And they have that darker life. So often people in the oligarchic state of mind have like a double life going on. The slip from oligarchy to democracy we saw was marked by both the loss of temperance and of courage. When the justice of the soul is no longer there, meaning there's no longer the proper order and functioning of the three parts of the soul, then it means that the high-spirited part of the soul is no longer functioning as a way of protecting the wisdom-loving part. And so the desires then can take control, and there's a complete loss of temperance. Temperance, remember, was when you have the proper balance within the soul and it's functioning as a unity, then the desires will naturally fall in line with what is healthy for the soul. And so the aristocratic soul only desires what is truly healthy for the soul. But what he calls the democratic soul is when the desires take over and they're all treated equally. With the healthy ones, the unhealthy ones, they're all treated equally. And that brings us then to this final shift from democracy to tyranny, where the desires have taken over so strongly that there is now a loss of reason. And there's been a slip in wisdom all the way through. The initial slip, of course, in timocracy. When you got to oligarchy, by that point, the person may no longer, they value reasoning, but they may not be focused on the absolute realities or on absolute truth, may instead be focused on, say, social images of what is good. And then by the time you get to democracy, it slipped even further with the loss of justice. You're no longer being guided then by the wisdom-loving part. And this person, to the degree that they reason at all, it's to justify their lifestyle of chasing every whim. By the time we get to tyranny, then reason is just like out the window. And so let's take a look at how Socrates describes this. In all of our translations, as always, from Paul Shorey. Okay, so Socrates describing the tyrannical person. He must look sharp to see then who is brave, who is great-souled, who is wise, who is rich, and such is his good fortune that whether he wishes it or not, he must be their enemy and plot against them all until he purge the city. It's a fine purgation, Epimontis says. Yes, just the opposite of that which physicians practice on our bodies. For while they remove the worst and leave the best, he does the reverse. Yes, for apparently he must, if he is to keep his power. Blessed then is the necessity that binds him, which bids him dwell for the most part with base companions who hate him, or else forfeit his life. Such it is. And so this is the fate of the person who is in the tyrannical state. And they go on. And would he not, the more he offends the citizens by such conduct, have the greater need of more and more trustworthy bodyguards? Of course. Whom then may he trust, and whence shall he fetch them? Unbidden, they will wing their way to him in great numbers if he furnish their wage. Ah, drones by the dog, I think you are talking of again, an alien in motley crew. You think right, Epimontis says. Now, the drones, you may recall from past videos, were symbols of the desires, and there are different types of desires and different types of drones, and so we'll be visiting that again. And Socrates goes on to explain that the soul then slips from the democratic nature to the tyrannical nature when the person tries to engender in his soul a ruling passion to be the protector of his idle and radical appetites. And Socrates describes it as a monstrous winged drone. Now, this is curious language to call it a winged drone. You may recall the three kinds of drones. You have some with wings and some without. And those without wings are either harmless or harmful, and described then as stingless or with stings. Now, the drones with wings were the, we call necessary desires, and desires that are good for you. So things like, the need to eat and to sleep and so on. And also like the love of wisdom is a desire. You have a desire for wisdom, and it's a healthy desire. So that would also fall among the winged drones. The wingless drones are the unnecessary desires. Some of them are not harmful to us, and some of them are. Now, the curious thing about this protector of the soul is that he calls it a monstrous winged drone. So one of the necessary desires, but a monstrous version of it. So let's go on to see how he talks about it. He says, when the other appetites buzzing about it, replete with incense and myrrh and chaplets and wine, and the pleasures that are released in such revelries, magnifying and fostering it to the utmost, when they awaken in the drone the sting of unsatisfied yearnings, why then this protector of the soul has madness for his bodyguard and runs amok. And if it finds in the man any opinions or appetites accounted worthy and still capable of shame, it slays them and thrusts them forth until it purges him of sobriety and fills and infects him with frenzy brought in from outside. Epimontis calls it a perfect description of the generation of the tyrannical man. Now notice some of the words here. The soul has madness for its bodyguard. It runs amok. It purges him of sobriety. He's infected with frenzy. So these are words that describe a person who lacks reason. The person is mad. And he's going to go on with this kind of language. And is not this analogy the reason why love has long been called a tyrant? By the way, just as a side note here, you may recall that all the way back in Book 1, there was a discussion between Socrates and Cephalus. And Cephalus was that old guy who was afraid of death, and he was making lots of sacrifices to the gods in his old age. They had a conversation where Cephalus called love a tyrant. And so we see there that Socrates was showing Cephalus as a man who appeared to be honest and good, but he had the nature of a tyrant. All right. So love has been called a tyrant, and Adimantus says that may well be. And does not a drunken man, my friend, have something of this tyrannical temper? Yes, he has. And again, the madman, the deranged man, attempts and expects to rule over not only men, but gods. Indeed, he does. And again, this language of lacking reason. Drunken, madman, he's deranged. And so Socrates concludes by saying, then a man becomes tyrannical in the full sense of the word, my friend, when either by nature or by habits or by both, he has become, even as the drunken, the erotic, the maniacal. And so what's being described here is a person who has an addiction of some sort. Now, it may be our classical images of addiction, like alcohol or drugs, or it may be, say, power or status. But whatever that addiction is, we will do anything. The person who's suffering from that addiction will do anything to hold on, to get what they are addicted to. They will lie, they'll cheat, they'll steal. Reasoning is out the window. And so that's the kind of nature that's being described here. But now, when under the tyranny of his ruling passion, he is continuously and in waking hours what he rarely became in sleep, and he will refrain from no atrocity of murder, nor from any food or deed. But the passion that dwells in him as a tyrant will live in utmost anarchy and lawlessness. And since it is itself sole autocrat, it will urge the polity, so to speak, of him in whom it dwells, to dare anything and everything, in order to find support for himself and the hubbub of his henchmen. To get a better sense of what's going on here, I'm just going to quickly remind us of the tripartite soul. Now, I know I've gone over this numerous times, and so I won't go into it in great detail. But remember that when the soul is healthy, it's in a state where the three parts of the soul are in their proper order and they're functioning in their proper way. And when they're functioning in this way, the soul is guided by the logos, or the reasoning part. It is then the thumos, or high-spirited part, then is acting like a guard dog of sorts, protecting the logos. Excuse me. Getting dry here. So the thumos then is protecting the reasoning part, keeping us focused on truth and goodness, and not letting us get distracted by pleasures or pains. And then you have the appetitive part, or the desiring part, which in the healthy soul, because it's got this proper balance and it's functioning as a unity, we only desire what is healthy for the soul. That's the healthy soul, the aristocratic soul. The tyrannical soul has it flipped completely upside down. You're guided, by the desires, and especially the one that you're addicted to. And then the high-spirited part, these are the bodyguards, the maniacal, mad bodyguards that are protecting that desire, or that protectorate of the soul. It's a protectorate because it's the ruler. It's ruling the soul. It's the protector. But it's actually hurting you. And the high-spirited part is now acting with madness. And the reasoning part, it's relegated to the very bottom. It's not really even functioning at all. So this is the tyrannical nature, or the tyrannical soul. Socrates goes on to say that throughout their lives then, they never know what it is to be the friends of anybody. They are always either masters or slaves. But the tyrannical nature never tastes freedom or true friendship. And does not the tyrannical man correspond to the tyrannical state in similitude, the democratic to the democratic and the others likewise? Surely. And may we not infer that the relation of state to state in respect of virtue and happiness is the same as that of the man to the man? Of course. In the first place, will you call the state governed by a tyrant free or enslaved, speaking of it as a state? And Adeimantus recognizes that it's utterly enslaved. And yet you see in it masters and freemen. I see a small portion of such, but the entirety, so to speak, and the best part of it, meaning the logos or the reasoning part of it, is shamefully and wretchedly enslaved. If then the man resembles the state, must not the same proportion obtain in him, and the soul teem with boundless servility and illiberality, the best and most reasonable parts of it being enslaved, while a small part, the worst and the most frenzied, plays the despot? Inevitably. Then will you say that such a soul is enslaved or free? Enslaved, I suppose. Again, does not the enslaved and tyrannized city least of all do what it really wishes? Decidedly so. Then, Socrates concludes, the tyrannized soul, to speak of the soul as a whole, also will least of all do what it wishes, but being always perforce driven and drawn by the gadfly of desire, it will be full of confusion and repentance, of course. And so that is the tyrannical soul. Now, what I just covered was basically from the end of Book 8, or the last part of Book 8, through maybe a third of the way into Book 9. There was actually a section right at the opening of Book 9, which I skipped over because I wanted the continuity of giving you all of what he says about the tyrannized soul. I want to go back, though, to that opening section because something very interesting here. Socrates says, of our necessary pleasures and appetites, there are some lawless ones, I think, which probably are to be found in us all, but which, when controlled by the laws and the better desires in alliance with reason, can in some people, remember when he uses the words like men, he often uses it in the general sense. It's not politically correct, but we can often make that adjustment. So it can in some people be altogether got rid of, or so nearly so that only a few weak ones remain, while in others the remnant is stronger and more numerous. Now, before I go on to see which desires he means, I want to just remind you that the laws refers to what we saw back in Book 2. The laws were that God is good in reality and the cause of good things, but not all things. And then secondly, that God never changes shape or deceives us. Now, initially, these are just hypotheses that we hold on to. You may think of them as axioms that we're going to build on. As we gain understanding and later knowledge, we have a greater conviction of these laws, and our courage also increases, of course, and all the virtues increase. But that's what he means by the laws. As far as the better desires in alliance with reason, this could be understood as like the oligarchic person who kind of uses reason to push down the less desirable desires. But I think a more accurate way to see it is to remember that some of the better desires are things like the desire for wisdom or the desire to know truth. These are desires as well. And when these desires are working with our reason, we can look at those things that hold us back and understand them better, understand our childhood, for example, understand the beliefs that our society teaches us. We can question ourselves. And with reason, being guided by these better desires, we can open up things that had a hold on us and see how empty they really are, and they lose their power and they fall away. And sometimes they're altogether got rid of, or sometimes a few weak ones remain, as he says here. All right, so Adeimantus asks, which desires do you mean? Those that are awakened in sleep, when the rest of the soul, The rational, gentle, and dominant part slumbers, but the beastly and savage part, replete with food and wine, gambols and, repelling sleep, endeavors to sally forth and satisfy its own instincts. You are aware that in such case there is nothing it will not venture to undertake, as being released from all sense of shame and all reason. Now, actually, we do see these desires that hold us back in our daydreams and throughout the day as well. It's not only in our sleep, but certainly they are awakened in our sleep, and that's what Socrates is focusing on here. However, he doesn't just stop there and say, oh, well, that's our nature, that's just the way it is. He's going to give us some advice about how we can use our dreams to combat these desires that hold us back from wisdom. He says, but when I suppose a man's condition is healthy and sober, and he goes to sleep after arousing his rational part, and entertaining it with fair words and thoughts, and attaining to clear self-consciousness, while he has neither starved nor indulged to repletion his appetitive part, so that it may be lulled to sleep and not disturb the better part by its pleasure or pain, but it may suffer that in isolated purity to examine and reach out toward and apprehend some of the things unknown to it, past, present, or future. And when he has in like manner tamed his passionate part, and does not after a quarrel fall asleep with anger still awake within him, but if he has thus quieted the two elements in his soul, and quickened the third, in which reason resides, and so goes to his rest, you are aware that in such case he is least likely to be lawless. So what Socrates is suggesting here is that if we bring ourselves to the healthiest state of mind that we're currently capable of reaching, if we fall asleep in that state of mind, then we can utilize the power of our dreams. And in particular here, I want to pull out this phrase from that long quote that I just showed you, that the soul can examine and reach out toward and apprehend some of the things unknown to it, past, present, or future. So in other words, in our dreams, we see things that we can use to help us better understand why we believe things that are false. And so he's highlighting here in particular 3 types of dreams. Now, there may be other types as well, but what he's focusing on here are 3 types. Dreams about the past are like reminders. Sometimes when we're, say, for example, an old insecurity has surfaced and we're acting on that, we may forget that there are times in the past when we acted more confidently or acted with excellence, and we may see that in a dream and be reminded of that. And oh yeah, so I'm this state of mind that I'm identifying with. It's not me. That's just something I learned and I need to understand it. And then you see that, you can start to focus on that. Present dreams, the revelatory dreams are actually quite common ones, but because our dreams tend to speak to us in hidden ways, it can be very hard to open these up. But throughout the day, there may be times when we didn't react in the best way, or in our most ideal response. And it's because of some belief that we hold. And so that will come out in our dreams. Our dreams will point us to that and say, hey, look at this. And it's revealing to us what we need to see. And then the third type of dream, future, these are prophetic, and these are less common, but they do happen as well. The problem with prophetic dreams is that often we don't realize we had a prophetic dream until the thing happens, and then we realize, oh my God, I dreamt about that. But anyway, it does happen. And these types of dreams can all help us better understand our own state of mind, our ways of doing music, as Socrates describes it here. Now, for those of you who are more interested in getting into this kind of thing, I actually do have a section on how to do dream work in a book that I wrote, which is in the description box. And also everything that I know about dream work comes from my teacher, Dr. Pierre Grimes, who is actually the founder of the whole philosophical counseling movement. He first wrote on it back in 1953. He was the first person in America to do so. And he has written a number of books since then. He does not focus only on dream work, but he does include it in his works. And so I do recommend his works to you. His name again is Pierre. He's not French, but his name is Pierre Grimes, Grimes. And if any of you are looking for his books and you're having trouble, please drop me a note and I will help you out. But anyway, that brings us then to the end of this section of Book 9. And so we see here all the different constitutions and also a way to get out. Now, the person in the tyrannical state of mind then is not using their reason, and they're going to have a lot of difficulty doing dream work. And so this is something that we can use to avoid falling into that place. The person who is there is going to have to probably do some other work before they're ready to do dream work, to prepare for it. But anyone watching this video is probably not in that state of mind, and so dream work is something open to you so that you can avoid this, because now you see the dangers of letting these states of mind run amok, that fall from aristocracy down to tyranny. And that brings us to the end of today's lesson, and I do hope you'll join me next week. We will complete Book 9, where we'll take a look at the best life. This is where Socrates is tying a lot of things together. So as always, I hope that you enjoyed what you saw here, and I'd appreciate a thumbs up. And also, if you have any questions or comments, you can send me an email, there's an email address in the description box, or you can leave a comment below. And I do hope you'll join me next week. Thank you so much.